From Jason Kidd, who was arrested for domestic abuse,
The Suns are in the midst of a big 6-game road trip without Jason Kidd. He's staying home after being accused of hitting his wife last week.
to William Bedford, who was caught with illegal narcotics several times.
Okay, because you got arrested for drug possession twice in 96 and 97.
Right.
Was that just for marijuana?
That was just marijuana.
Let's take a look at some NBA players you didn't know served hard time. Let's get right into it, starting off with none other than Delonte West. He had a solid career as a versatile guard in the NBA, playing for teams like the Boston Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers for almost a decade. But he also had a reputation for being a controversial figure and for owning multiple firearms. In 2009, he was pulled over for a traffic violation while riding his motorbike, and the police found 3 firearms on him. As a result, Delonte was sentenced to prison and later put on house arrest. Some people feel that he received lenient treatment compared to what ordinary people would have faced for a similar offense. And honestly, they were probably right. But he's not the only athlete that got off easy. Let's talk about Carmelo Anthony as well. Hey, did you know that Carmelo Anthony, aka Melo, has been living up to his nickname both on and off the court? This Denver Nuggets star has gotten busted for weed not once, but twice. The first time he had it in his backpack when he went through airport security. But that's not all. Melo also got picked up for drinking and driving back in 2008 when he was playing for the Portland Trail Blazers. He pleaded guilty and had to do community service as well as pay legal fees for the trial. That is, when Jason Kidd got arrested for domestic abuse. Jason Kidd's arrest back in 2001 might not be talked about much these days, but it was definitely a serious conviction at the time. Kidd was charged with spousal abuse, which is a pretty big deal. He ended up pleading no contest and paid a fine of $200. He was also ordered to take anger management classes. What makes this story ironic is that 6 years later, Kidd and his wife got divorced, and he actually filed a restraining order against her. He claimed that she was the one abusing him. Now that's a twist you don't see every day. Moving on, this next NBA player got arrested for more serious charges, and he got off pretty easy too. I'm talking about J.R. Smith. NBA fans, get ready to hear about one of the wildest rides in NBA history. He's currently making headlines for his playoff performances, but did you know that he's had some trouble with the law in the past? Back in 2007, Smith was sentenced to 30 days in jail after pleading guilty to reckless driving. His black SUV ran into a stop sign and another car, tragically resulting in the death of the other driver. Despite the serious charges, he only ended up serving 24 days. To make matters worse, Smith has a history of car accidents and reckless driving. In the year after the fatal crash, he received 2 speeding tickets and 3 license suspensions, according to NJ.com. While a lot of famous athletes tend to get off easy, like a lot of the ones we named on this list, this next one definitely did not. It's William Bedford. We all know that life after the league can be tough for some players, and William Bedford is no exception. The 7-foot center who played for the Phoenix Suns, Detroit Pistons, and the San Antonio Spurs back in the day unfortunately struggled with drug addiction after retiring from the game. According to CommercialAppeal.com, Bedford was arrested twice for drug possession in 1996 and 1997, respectively. But his biggest bust came in 2001 when he was caught transporting a massive 25 pounds of marijuana to Michigan. The result? A 10-year prison sentence. But hey, Bedford's not just sitting on the sidelines these days. Since his release in 2011, he's been staying active with basketball and even coaches in Memphis. It's great to see him back in the game. Let's talk about DeShaun Stevenson. This one has got more than a couple of arrests under his belt from his days in the league. One happened way back when he was a young guard for the Utah Jazz. Stevenson was accused and convicted of the statutory rape of a 14-year-old girl when he was just 20 years old. He served community service for a case that was changed from a felony to a misdemeanor. But let's fast forward to more recent times, shall we? Stevenson was picked up for public intoxication, and get this, it happened just 2 days after the Dallas Mavericks won their first championship in June. I mean, can you blame the guy for partying a little too hard? Honestly, I'm surprised we don't see more of these types of arrests in sports. How is it that every time a team wins the championship, there isn't at least one guy ending up in a drunk tank? Let's just say that Stevenson wasn't exactly the model citizen that night. Now, this next player isn't much of a surprise, considering he's a pretty controversial person. Yep, I'm talking about none other other than Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley, known as the Round Mound of Rebound, was a star player in the NBA, but he was also known for causing some trouble. One time, he even spit on a fan, and he got arrested twice for assault after getting into fights off the court. The second time was pretty wild. He actually threw someone through a plate glass window in a bar. And in 2009, he was caught running a red light and driving under the influence. Hey, nobody's perfect, but man, does Barkley have more than his fair share of misdemeanors on his record. Now this next one is pretty crazy. Ron Metta World Artest. Back when he was still known as Ron Artest, Metta World Peace, yep, he changed his name, had some serious trouble keeping his cool. This guy was involved in one of the craziest NBA brawls of all time, the infamous Pacers-Pistons brawl in 2004.
And Wallace did, Wallace right at Artest. This has potential to be serious if they don't get between. Wallace upset. Players trying to hold each other off.
And he got slapped with community service and probation. But Ron wasn't done with the legal system just yet. 3 years later, he pleaded no contest to spousal abuse charges. That cost him a fat fine, some community service, and mandatory counseling. Maybe that's why he changed his name to something more peaceful, to avoid having arrest in his name. But even if you thought that was insane, wait till you hear about this next athlete. It's Eddie Johnson Jr. Fast Eddie Johnson has had more run-ins with the law than a bank robber. This former shooting guard for the Supersonics.
Saw those games here on TNT. What a surprise in Detroit. Eddie Johnson's baseline jumper.
Hawks and the Cavaliers has been arrested in the Florida jail system for just about everything under the sun. Drugs? Check. Sexual assault? Check. Burglary? Check. Violence? Check. You get the idea. In 2008, all of his shenanigans finally caught up with him, and Johnson's life took a serious nosedive. He was found guilty of molesting an 8-year-old girl and is now serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. Yikes, talk about going from Fast Eddie to Locked Up Eddie. Finally, let's wrap up this video with one last NBA player you didn't know served hard time. It's none other than Shawn Kemp. Shawn Kemp, aka the Rain Man, led his Seattle team to the NBA Finals twice.
So it's 67-57 still. Oh, Kemp with a 360 turn on the dribble and slam dunk.
That is a real dunk.
But he couldn't overcome Jordan's Bulls. After that, Kemp struggled with weight gain and difficulty jumping. Turns out he was battling a drug addiction and was arrested with cocaine, weed, and even some guns. This led to a downward spiral, and Kemp ended up in jail, closer to his 7 children. And that's all for today on the NBA players you probably didn't know served hard time in jail.
Job by Barkley, and the crowd turned on by that one. And here's another fast break try. Dishing off to Tony. Yeah. Here goes Moses, and the ball knocked away. Picked up by Malone. No follow-up. Barkley. Sixers lead. Offensive rebound. Moses blocked by Jabbar. It goes to Barkley.